Hello, witchy people. You may be wondering why I'm sat here in the dark with nothing but a cup of coffee, a solitary lit candle, and a snoring dog to keep me company. Well, many years ago, I used to run a website called The Haunted ChaCha. And on that site, I would write down the tales that people had told me, not necessarily ghost stories, just tales of strange happenings, weird goings on in strange places, eerie places, places that were supposedly haunted, maybe. So if you want to hear a few, grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and I'll tell you some. Since this story was written, Testwood House has been razed to the ground. It no longer exists. And as far as I know, they've built homes, flats and houses on the land where Testwood House once stood. I don't think I would like to live there. This story is called The Murder, the Children and the Fog. Testwood House. It's famed for its hauntings. The house itself has been many things over the years, including a hunting lodge for Henry VIII and offices for a well-known sherry shippers. It's empty now and has been for a while, so I decided to take a visit with Craig, my husband. It was pitch black when we arrived, save for the weak light coming from people's homes. Torches on, Craig and I started to walk around. Firstly, I wanted to see the dog's grave. We found a little stone marker near the side driveway, a sad and tiny rock with the dog's name engraved upon it. I bent down to touch the stone when Craig and I were both startled by a haunting, eerie screech. Peacocks, we thought. The sound they make is one of the most spine-chilling I have heard, especially when I'm stood in the middle of Ghost Central in the dark, with tendrils of mist snaking around my chilled body. We decided to make our way round to the back of the large house, striding across the front lawns and ignoring the more distinct pathway that led down the right side of the building into darkness and grappling trees. The left side of the house was flanked by residential properties, a much more easier and less scary way to go. Our flashlights were bright, creating light pathways through the dark and mist. But even the brightness couldn't scratch away at the atmosphere. It was as though something was waiting. Just as we rounded the back of the house, I noticed a door set back in the wall, a small door with a metal grille on the inside seen through a small window, and a small round handle on the outside. I touched the handle and it was icy cold, and though it was misty and definitely a cold night, this door handle felt colder than it should have. I felt sick. I stepped back to the comfort of Craig and stared intently at the metal grille on the inside of the door. There was breath on the inside of the window, a slight misting of the glass, as though someone was stood there, close to the door, breathing in and out. The mist grew and shrank, but there was no face to be seen peering at us, just the breath. Then came the voices, so close to us. "Come on, boy!" And then a dog, barking, a yappy little dog bark, and laughter. It sounded like several people, with a dog or two. The voices were so close and yet muffled. From the few words I could make out, it sounded like people going on a shooting trip, grouse or pheasant perhaps. Then a call from the peacocks again. I was a little more than spooked. Rooted to the spot, I listened as the voices came near and then passed us by, but we didn't see a single soul. Just Craig and I stood in the dark, alone. And the weird thing? There were no peacocks either, just the sounds. And then the door rattled. It was automatic that Craig and I both turned to look at the door. It wasn't moving, but you could hear the rattling sound as though it were. And then the face appeared. Pressed up against the window in the door, a pale, sad face, with a hand next to it making imprints on the window in the misty breathing marks there. The face turned to peer behind it, as though someone had called the child from the inside of the house, and then giggling from inside. Children laughing. Time to go home. We ran to the car. I had heard and seen enough. As we turned the corner to the grand front of the house, I looked up the main gates where we had come in. It seemed 1,000 moments had passed since we had arrived there. "Who's that?" said Craig, pointing up the driveway. Swirling with mist, a tall, gaunt figure stood in the drive, and as the mist gathered around the figure, Craig and I raised our torches to shine the light on the man, and he just wasn't there. We both knew what we had seen. A man in a top hat, standing there. It was an indistinct figure, especially with the mist blurring the view a little, but he had been there. As we got to the car and wrenched open the doors, we thought we heard one last eerie sound. Wheels and hooves on gravel. Opposite Testwood House, across the main road, is a little street called Cook's Lane. Craig and I have visited this little area too. It reputedly got its name from being where the body of the cook from Testwood House was dumped after being murdered. The murderer is said to have had connections with a man in a top hat, a tall, thin man. Ghosts of 2 children are said to haunt the house, and laughter has been heard by others, as well as a face seen pressed up against the door with a window. A coach and 4 have been heard on the driveway, but rarely seen, and a barking dog has been heard in the house and in the grounds. Seems as though Craig and I had about everything thrown at us that night.